call the meeting to order. Just a couple of minutes short or late. I'll mention some logistics. Anyone who's joining remotely, we would ask you to change your name to be show your first and last name so we know who we're talking to and who's talking to us. Anyone who speaks, again, we ask you to state your name and where you live. We'd ask you to keep your comments to under 3 minutes or under 5 minutes for general business and appearances. If you're speaking about a specific agenda item, we will ask you to keep your comments to germane to that item. Anyone who wishes to speak must be called on by the mayor and to make a statement or ask a question. And if you run over your time or stray from the topic at hand, we will be reminding you of the need to get back on track. And from that, we will start. We have one council member who is appearing remotely. So, Carrie, would you introduce yourself?
Carrie Brown, District 3.
All right, thank you. We have the agenda that everyone's seen. Any proposed or requested changes to the agenda? All right, we'll consider the agenda approved. We can now move on to general business and appearances. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is not on tonight's agenda. As we do every week, we ask you to keep your comments to 5 minutes, and I can start with people in the room if there's anyone in the room who'd like to be heard.
Just because I'm talking doesn't mean I'll be heard. You can talk to that. I don't know how many of y'all have walked the bike path over by Confluence Park. It's kind of ironic to have a sensitive area, no camping sign still there, while today the trash was picked up. Yesterday, day before, it was overflowing. And that encourages folks to just trash the place even further, just throw whatever they want everywhere. Those are some of the folks that made the big trash the Country Club Road too. And if we're going to allow, I think if we're going to reconsider the sensitive areas, we need to do it in an organized fashion and look at where people can camp. There's dozens and dozens of people living outside right now, and it's really dangerously hot, and we don't have air conditioning in the library yet. We don't have public restrooms available in the evenings or nights, and there's no excuse for this other than dysfunction on this council and the task force. So I'm calling upon your conscience to really wake up and realize this is within our grasp to fix in short order. And it has to do with identifying where people can camp. You know, there's people like tucked in the bushes everywhere, and some of them are making a huge mess. And I know that we can't ticket people for littering, but there has to be an incentive or a managed type camping arrangement where someone like Dawn, whom we pay, or we were paying through Good Samaritan as a street outreach worker, she could visit the different campsites and enforce a level of land care so that people aren't ruining. But we really need to consider all available places where people could be without being harassed. You know, I told you about the running people's tents out of the park, and in violation of our encampment policy, dumping it in parking lots, putting it in rainy containers. You know, that's really unethical, and y'all don't seem to think that anything needs to be done about it. And it's just you're denying dignity, and as long as you continue to deny dignity to these folks in the way of basic care, hygiene, safe place to sleep, you're going to pay for it with increased police calls. So you can keep complaining that the police calls are, going up for the unhoused population, but that's a direct correlation to us denying people the dignity of a safe place to sleep and hygiene. So ignoring the sign that we put up, which should have never have been put up, we still have months on which people could potentially use, ones could use Country Club Road. We need to order some trailers. We could order trailers for like a 4-plex flush toilet trailer and a 4-plex shower and put them on 1216 Main. That would be a demonstrable, affordable effort to provide some dignity, and even for our tourists who wander around looking for a bathroom. So 12 to 16 Main has got no market value to anybody right now. So there's an immediate emergency response that we could probably even get some state funding to do. And then those things are portable. When something else comes up, we can move them to Country Club or move them to, Hubbard Park or to Peace Park or wherever. I don't recommend aggregating too many people together in one place. I think there are people who want quiet, there are people who want to talk. There should or should not be alcohol allowed, but you need management, and we do have management capable people willing to do that work. It's just, we have not resolved the plan. We had $400 and something thousand of ARPA money in the budget to take care of the unhoused, and y'all squandered it and pissed it away and filled every other hole and didn't spend a dime on taking care of those folks, maybe some outhouses. And, look at your own consciences and take some action now, not a year from now. Not 2 years or 5 years from now.
Thanks, Steve. Is there anybody else in the room who'd like to be heard? Zach, I see your hand up.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I'm Zach Hughes, Montpelier. To Mr. Whitaker's point, I believe there is going to be something done out there tomorrow. I understand that the folks have been asked to leave that area. My understanding, I've also heard that they've been told to leave the city. However, I don't have the other side of that story, so I don't feel comfortable with that. But I will say that just telling people to leave the city isn't going to work. They live here. So I'm very frustrated as Mr. Whitaker, but I also think that, we need to acknowledge this is a city problem as well. We said it's a regional, and it is, but right now it's a city issue. And I have to acknowledge something else that Mr. Whitaker talks about, because I'm hearing that we just don't have the money or resources right now, and we need them. We talked about the possibility in task force today of approaching the state for grant money. But I think what really got to me was this afternoon hearing on the ground that folks were told to leave the city. And no, they will not leave the city. I think we need to take homelessness seriously. This is why I had recommended that homelessness task force be turned into a committee. I don't want to hear there's too many committees when you guys already started one on child care. No. And I'm this close to walking away from the problem because no one's listening. So I want you to listen. I want you to read the reports that we're going to send because this is a problem. It's not going to go away. And I will say on an upshot, I want to congratulate Good Samaritan for its near opening of a shelter in the city, which is something I didn't think would ever happen here. So that's a step. That's 18 beds. Okay. And I also want to acknowledge real quick that I go out there, Don goes out there on, a daily basis. But there are limitations to what we can do out there, but we do our best. Thank you very much. I yield back to the mayor.
Thanks, Zach. Tori,
Thank you so much. I want to second what Zach Hughes and Steve Whitaker have already.
Tori, could you please mention your name?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Tori Rodine. Yeah, I live in Montpelier. I'm on the homelessness task force. The I want to second what Zach and what Steve Whitaker have both already said very eloquently. I want to add to it that my understanding, but this is based only on what I've heard in the news, is that the among the people camping at Confluence Park were actually the victims of the episode that was publicized very widely, were among the people who were camping at Confluence Park because they were among the people evicted from the motels, from the emergency shelter at the motels. This isn't this this is not getting rid of people who are perpetrating crime. This is getting rid of the victims of crime, and asking them to leave the one place that they had found that they were apparently able to camp. And I just, that is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. And I think probably it ought to be keeping all of us up at night. I appreciate the police department being quoted as saying that quarter of the calls they get are coming relating to unhoused people. But in point of fact, they're as likely when you read that, it reads as though these are the people perpetrating crimes, but in point of fact, including at Confluence Park, they're the victims of crimes, and the police need to be there for them as they are for anybody else who lives here. Also, for anybody who didn't see the article in the Valley News, one of the people evicted from the motels, who was in motel shelter due to serious illness or disability, was found dead on the street in White River Junction a few days ago. And I want to believe that that's the last person in that situation, but I'm not confident about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori. Okay, I am not seeing anyone else. Up, Dave Bellini.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, good dialogue. I don't think the city of Montpelier is going to be able to solve this problem. I worked for the state for 42 years within the Agency of Human Services. This is, I think somebody needs to go to the governor and probably the legislature and say, look, we've got over 3,500 employees that work for the Agency of Human Services. Where the hell are they? You know, I think a couple of them need to be stationed in Montpelier, because it is really some poor leadership and poor policy decisions shared between the legislature and the executive branch that have, in a large way, created this situation. And I won't go through all the history of all the poor decisions. Like closing the state hospital years ago with no plan for mental health. So I hope you got a strong lobbying group with the executive branch and with the legislative branch, because it's going to take people to do the outreach work and to act as a caseworker and a social worker, to have contact with folks that really can't live by themselves. Let's face it, there's a portion of our population that can't live by themselves. There's some people that are down and out and they need somebody to talk to, and they probably don't need that much. It's a whole bunch of different needs. There's some people that are hardcore criminals that have done time in jail, and frankly, I don't have any sympathy for them. But the majority of people are not them. So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Dave. Not seeing any other hands now. We can move on to the consent agenda. There are two items on the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. Next, city manager search, kickoff meeting with the consultant. That must be you.
That's me.
All right, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Should I speak into the microphone?
Yes.
So you want me to just
Why don't you just
get going here?
get going here?
All right,
Take the ball and run with it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to be of service to all of you on the city manager search. I have met some of you in the process for the consultant selection via Zoom, but I haven't met all of you, so just a brief background. My name is Ian Coyle. My company is called Pracademic Partners. A little bit of a play on words, practitioner and academic. I spent 20 plus years as a practitioner of local government management, a village manager prior to being a county administrator, and I spent 17 plus years teaching Masters of Public Administration courses for people that are either current or aspiring city and county managers. So that's kind of how I came up with the moniker there. Work nationwide. I'm based out of upstate New York. I'm based out of the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, a town called Livonia. My last position in local government was county administrator in Livingston County, which is home to SUNY Geneseo, if you know the college, also the westernmost Finger Lake, which is Canisius. Here today to basically kick off the process, kind of let you know what has been done already, and then ask you for inputs on some key and critical questions that still need to be answered and addressed. Kind of some lingering, what direction do you wish to go in type questions, because there's not necessarily a prescription for certain elements and phases and subphases of a traditional city manager search. So that's kind of the main, most important piece of today. So just kind of, I'll go through a couple of things and then I'll kind of pause at certain sections and just kind of open it up if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Why don't you run this, see how things go? I can tell you that there's all kinds of ideas, but the decisions of where you should go, decisions on this side of the table have not been made. So
Good, okay.
we're a collaborative
Good to know.
process here.
What I thought I would do is just kind of breeze through a traditional process and then kind of go into the innards of that process and sort of what needs to be addressed or answered. So what I do is I do two things up front, regardless of engagement. One is an intake form, which is usually administered, handled by HR. So in this case, Tanya and I have been communicating on that. You know, key and critical pieces of information that are necessary to kind of frame the messaging, frame the recruitment brochure, frame the engagement, the outreach that's going to be done to try to solicit interested parties to express interest in the position. So that intake form is only a couple of pages, and it asks a series of questions, some of which, frankly, may not be addressable by Tanya, but I'll get as much as I can, right? I'm sure she'll involve Kelly at this point in time for some organizational inputs that might be necessary, some data points and things like that. Once I have that in place, that again helps form what eventually will be the messaging, the marketing, the recruitment brochure, the position profile. With that, I also have, the last couple of years, have started to do a needs assessment with the city council or the governing body, so in this case, the city council, and also with senior staff, so department heads and directors. So that's another kind of touch point of involvement for particular constituencies, chiefly the governing body, which is the most important one here, right? You know, because you're the decision-making authority and the oversight of the city manager, but also, you know, those staff inputs. So it's asking questions like, you know, desired key traits and competencies, desired style, you know, communication, leadership aptitude, you know, those sort of things. A lot of city manager job descriptions across the country, from, you know, Idaho to Kansas to Vermont, look very similar. And so the distinction that I want to make in my involvement in my role is, what do you really want to see? What's really important for this city? what's really important in terms of projects that are going on, initiatives, what kind of style do you want to see, what kind of, background you want to see, what kind of key competencies are going to be most important for you to be able to kind of see in that ideal candidate profile. So I will do that. The next couple phases, and I'm going to come back to that in a second because there's a question mark on even that point in time as far as asking all of you. That point in time, okay, it sort of feeds into a process where we've now got a recruitment profile. We can kind of, what I call go live. And go live means it's out on the street, we're casting the net, we're spreading that net as wide and encompassing and as equitable and diverse as we possibly can, right? We're placing the advertisement in a variety of different associations, both in-state, out-of-state, regional, national, specific to different constituencies as well. So there are a variety of groups in the realm of public administration who cater to folks who are interested in this line of work. So the International City County Management Association, ICMA is one, the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, Local Government Hispanic Network, Women Leading Local Government, the Association for Asian Public Administrators, even the National Association of County Administrators, the National League of Cities. All of those places and associations and contacts are pre-existing with me, so I already have them. They're kind of foundational to the work that I do, so it'll be easy to kind of get this in the right spots. Once I became under contract, my firm with the city for this search, I already did like a teaser, coming soon sort of a thing. I've already had, interested parties make outreach to me, intrigued by the opportunity. So I think between, my network and my connections, my association, that's ideally what I'm bringing to the table to assist you with is spreading the word about the opportunity. At that point in time, I'd say that's a 3 to 4 week window where it's out on the street. You're asking for applications. You're soliciting that expression of interest from your ideal candidates. In that mix, just to be frank and candid, because I am very transparent, you're going to have your contenders and your pretenders in that mix. There'll be people that really aren't qualified or maybe aren't really a good fit. You want to look at a first round interview, shortly thereafter, trying to schedule that. Who's involved in that and what that looks like is one of my questions I'll get to in the end. I just want to breeze through the most common phase elements. You get to a first round interview, probably on a virtual basis, much like this, you participating, the candidate zooming in, first round interview screening, maybe 5 to 10 people, again, totally up to the wishes and the will of council. Then you want to screen that down over time. The process for that, again, we can discuss what you want that to look like. And then the finalist interviews in person. You can do another round after that, certainly if you want to kind of keep going, but traditionally kind of on the spectrum of how these things tend to look, kind of that midpoint or that most common is probably the phases and the elements of which I'm describing. And then you make your selection after that. Ideally unanimously. I mean, you like to see the selection of the city manager be a unanimous selection. I understand that unanimous selections don't always exist at the municipal level, but that's what you ideally want to see. As far as that timeline goes, there's at least 4 or 5 key and critical questions that have some kind of sub-questions to them to contemplate and think about and come to an agreement on as we look to commence. Certainly concurrent to that, I'm already able to start getting the ball rolling. I mentioned the intake process and those initial pieces of the needs assessment. Those are concurrently going on. Literally right now, they're concurrently going on. And I'll kind of go through the questions and maybe we can come back to them as you see, as you wish. The first is council involvement. So council involvement is critical. So it's a search committee or is it not a search committee? If it's a search committee, what does that look like? What's the makeup of that? The council involvement with the application process. When do you want to see the applications? At what point in time or what phase or segment of the search? So for example, a winnowed down list and then you ranking. Some places have wanted to see every one of them. Some have only wanted to see a short list already sort of pre-vetted, predetermined. So your role in shortlisting and when you want to see the applications, that's a key and critical question to consider and contemplate. I did mention a sub-element of that would be a search committee. So in a lot of places there is an established one, in some places there is not. Some places it's just the council kind of acting in that capacity. And your answer to that question potentially could be predicated on the next kind of question to consider, which is stakeholder and public involvement and public engagement and resident engagement and what that looks like and what you want that to look like. That comes in really two different phases. I'll actually start with the end phase because I think that's probably the most common, kind of almost 101, I think, for a city of your type and stature, which would be, that end phase of a public, maybe a public forum, a meet and greet type thing where you have your finalist candidates making a presentation, sitting for a Q&A type session to engage with the community as a finalist candidate for the city manager position. That's very common. I would also recommend if you're aligned with that and in line with that, to include staff at that point in time as well in some capacity, and I have some thoughts on that and how that's worked in my past experience. But it's also phase one, sort of that initial and the preliminary, and I think that's a question to consider. So what level of public involvement do you desire initially to vis-a-vis like the needs assessment process that I was talking about? What do we really want to see in a city manager? Those ideal characteristics, questions like what's going, very frank and candid questions. What do you feel is going right with the city? What maybe needs some attention? Kind of a mini SWOT analysis type alignment of the questions, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of the city government proper. What role can the city manager play? Again, style, communication style. And then I include about 15 to 20 very common characteristics, traits, or experiences of kind of like the ideal city manager candidate. And then I ask for kind of priority preferences and rankings on those. So for example, public engagement, communication, intergovernmental relations, budget, financial acumen, human resources experience, those type of kind of traits and competencies, and kind of ask for, for you'll see that, what are your prioritizations. So when you talk about the public, there is an opportunity, should you wish to pursue that, to engage the public in that kind of a vein. It could be a facilitated discussion early on. I'd be happy to do that in terms of maybe like a public forum early on, if you, again, desire that level or that type of public engagement. But again, that's my third one, council involvement, search committee, and then stakeholder public involvement. What do you wish that to look like? I have two more here. The fourth is staff involvement. So that's kind of the when, the what, and the how of that. We've already commenced a piece of that by including the department heads in the needs assessment component of the initial intake process. So I think you've at least checked the box there, so to speak, with staff involvement. Again, it's kind of the phase one, phase two. So that's a phase one involvement opportunity. The phase two involvement opportunity would be more closer to the end of the process, where maybe in addition to those public engagement sessions, which they would be welcome to participate in as a staff member, having maybe an individualized one for maybe the finalists to meet one on many, I say one-on-one, but in that type of environment with the department heads, and then also with maybe an all-staff open house kind of a meeting. Again, totally up to you, but I have seen that work successfully in my experience with these type of recruitments. So again, that fourth question element for you to consider is staff involvement, when, what, and how. And then the last is really just kind of an overarching is process, timeline, and those pieces. So trying to come up with even date ranges is nice to see. Specific dates even better, but date ranges are nice to see, so we kind of try to stick and keep to a timeline. It's rare, but in a recent recruitment I did, we literally included the date for the first round, Zoom interview for those people will be this date. Everybody knew it up front, right? Right in the recruitment brochure, it indicated that was the case. Seen other ones are kind of have a little bit more of a grain of that, where it's ideally, or it's couched or conditioned somehow, but say, ideally, we hope to have first round interviews with the candidates in this date range, with second round finalist interviews in this date range, and maybe even being transparent about what that looks like, once you come to an agreement upon what that looks like, because people should know perhaps if you are okay with and want kind of that public forum potentially at the end, letting people know, as part of this process, the finalists will be asked to, address the public in a Q&A type style, or a meet and greet, or a public meet and greet, something of that nature. So I've been rambling a little bit here, so I'm going to pause and have you ask some questions. But generally speaking, kind of that's the step-by-step process that I went through, kind of breezed through a little bit, the Reader's Digest version. And then the other elements are really, what do you wish to see? Particularly with search committee council involvement and public engagement, and kind of the when and the what of the public engagement component especially.
Anyone want to jump in first? Ben, you look like you do.
Thank you for that. And I also just want to say I really appreciate you showing up in person. That means a lot, right? And and I'll just quickly say, I think we've already talked about it as a council, but as the search committee for you, we interviewed a lot of great candidates, and unanimously we didn't even really confer. You were the person that we wanted to go with for a variety of reasons. One, because you're the kind of person that shows up. And two, we were looking for somebody with, that was really a clear communicator and could provide us with options. And so I'm glad you're here. I have a lot of the same kind of questions that you have, and I think the thing that I'm looking for most tonight is like, who owns setting the process, right? Like, I believe you recommended the idea of like, we haven't done this in 30 years. Right? It's probably the most important thing that any of us will do while we're on the council. And the council ultimately needs to own this decision, right? And so with that in mind, like, I think it's really important just to be super clear about that up front. But like, from a practical level, how do we move these kinds of things forward? Who do you talk to? Who's your point person? How do we communicate? I think the community engagement, all of us I know are really committed to that, and there's a lot of interest in the community about it. But what does that look like? And frankly, I think doing it sooner rather than later is important, because it's not just like they're weighing in on the decision, it's like weighing in on, as you said, the qualities of what are we looking for. And so I don't know that we're going to answer all the questions tonight, but I think my real hope is just clarity around roles and responsibilities and who's doing what and what is the opportunity for community engagement. And most importantly, I really want to see a transparent process that is clear, that people can say, what's happening with the search? We can point to the website and say, here is a narrative description of the various steps in this process, and this is where we are right now. Last thing I'll just say, I think it's one of the ways in which perhaps to have kind of community engagement, this is definitely a council decision that we need to own. And yet I think like, I don't know if you've had experience with other communities that have had like advisory committees of community stakeholders that might include staff, but like, is there a way in which we could include people in some of the screening or interview processes that they make recommendations, again, recognizing that ultimately the council is the one that needs to decide.
Palin, go ahead.
So thank you, Ben. You summarized most of the questions I have, so it is good. In addition to these questions, I believe that we need to revise job description for the city manager. This is something you could do, or we should work with Tanya. What is the process if you want to renew or revise the job description?
Yeah, so as part of kind of like my normal engagement in the intake process, I do ask for the existing job description, and I will sort of take a stab at any suggestions to alter that if anything seems striking or maybe an augmentation or an edit or something like that. I'd be happy to do that as part of the process, and I was sort of expecting to do that. Obviously, the full okay would have to come from all of you to be aligned with my thinking on whatever that looks like, but I'm going to be doing that as part of the process, yes. And just want to go back quick, is that your only question for right now?
Yeah.
I just want to go back to one question about kind of advisory board members. I have had some experience in a city government doing that for a city manager search. And, sort of, to be honest, kind of hand-picking, right? I mean, you have to be okay with, either you put out a solicitation or something like that in a quick time and you get interested parties to express interest, but you're essentially hand-picking who you want involved from the public, and you have to be okay with that, right? Because, I mean, you're putting yourself out there, why wasn't I selected, why wasn't I selected? And, you're gonna get a little bit of that. But certainly that is something that places have done, and they've been advisory only, in nature. So they maybe opined on the recruitment brochure, they opined on some of the characteristics. They, in one case, they were a separate interview-ish panel along with the actual council separately, and engaged the finalists. So it can be any one of different scenarios. And the other thing, you had said something about, information updates, and I did fail to mention that, minimally as part of my process, I just have to do it Friday. So once a week on Friday, once I get going, I'll provide for a conduit. So right now it's Tanya. If you want it to be somebody else, just let me know. A small information, kind of bulleted, synopsized, summarized update of what's happened that previous week. So at the start, it's usually, working on final edits, brochure ready to go live, etc. Right? Second kind of phases, it's out on the street. It's been placed with the Vermont City-Town Management Association. It's been placed with the National Forum for Black Public Administrators. It's on LinkedIn. It's an official ad. It's on the website. Next thing, okay, we've got 5 expressions of interest this week, etc. So that's sort of what it will look like, regardless of any extra level. But we can talk about that extra level. I'm happy to participate in any extra level of type of information notices that you desire.
Go ahead, Adrian.
I just had a quick question just to take a little bit more into a deep dive around the recruitment profile. Is that what you called it, the recruitment profile? So I'm curious, so you're going to be gathering all this information. I think the council did, I think it was a needs assessment. I don't know if I'm getting those terms. I filled out a big form. I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of questions. And so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So in my world of recruiting that I've done in my life, we've created a profile of the person that we're looking for, right? Like, so that we can, measure it. There's like a scale or something, like, so we know exactly like the person profile, not the recruitment profile. Maybe it's the same thing.
It is.
Oh, it is the same thing. Okay. That's what I was just trying to make sure that we weren't missing that piece of when you do all this data collection, all these needs assessments, you say, oh, here's the person you're looking for, like whatever it is, communications, whatever, like, so that when we get those applications, we can do a one-to-one comparison and we can rank them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so nomenclature basically,
Okay.
same. So position profile, recruitment profile, it will take the form of essentially an employment advertisement, but it's also a profile of what the ideal candidate looks like in your collective minds. So back to the question of kind of the point person or whatever, it will be important to get that, at some point in time, we'll have to get a final okay on that and what that looks like, because that's as inclusive as it physically possibly can be, but it's not exhaustive, right? So it's not going to have every single element of every single submission that was received. It just can't, right? So that's part of my job, is to try to collate that and coordinate that and kind of make it such that it's representative of what those inputs look like, to your point. Yep. And then one more point on that is when we get to the piece of the screening process, I do create like a ranking system based on the top X of the ideal characteristics. and then rankings around them so you have something that you can point to when you're reviewing, so it's not just.
I'm curious about a couple things. I like the idea of getting the public involved early. I just don't know how best to do it. We have plenty of people in town who are outspoken, and we'll hear from them. But we have people that we don't ever hear from, and I'm just wondering, in your experience, how many ways are there to try and draw the public into it and to give them some ownership in the process while still maintaining ownership of the decision that we ultimately make. And then I'm also curious about how frequently we'll hear from you. How does that communication work over the whatever timeline we establish?
Yep. So ways to communicate, certainly, again, up to you. I mean, what I might recommend, given the interest in the public engagement component, would be maybe kind of a three-pronged approach, perhaps. Just as, I'm actually thinking and talking at the same time here, so I don't have any sort of outline in front of me. So you have to your point about audiences and sort of that, the silent or the non-participatory group that really does still want to voice an opinion, all the way to the people who are at every meeting and want to voice an opinion on everything, right? You have that's your spectrum in municipal life, no matter where you are. So you could do some slightly reconstituted version of what you all saw in the needs assessment for the public, right? You could see that in an e-form that's quite easy to create, digital, right? So they can go on anytime when they want to. You could make that a paper version as well. I could probably work with the communications individual to talk through that and maybe some means of communication and what works best or whatever. But certainly the people who might not be on the internet all the time, so maybe how do you get to public libraries, this center, City Hall, nonprofits, education institutions, those kind of places. So make it available, in a probably a tighter window, because again, the only struggle with phase one public involvement is it does elongate the process. It's not a bad thing, it's just a reality. It's just to be very frank and upfront about it. Because you're purposefully and intentionally wanting to gain those inputs. You gotta purposely and intentionally gain those inputs, and it takes time. And then the third component to that, so that's 1 and 2, but below those kind of A and B, 1A, 1B is, how do you get to the older population somehow, some way? How do you get to the population that doesn't speak English some way, somehow, right? So, I mean, those are the things that you may want to think about. And then that third level could be a scheduled, forum of some sort that I would be happy to be present to facilitate, which would just be an open forum with some, streaming or whatever, some note-taking, and just, again, subject to your wishes, but an open Q&A style where it's, or really almost comment style, and just you're gaining those inputs. So those would be, again, 3, I don't want to sound, curt when I say, but 3 boxes to check. I don't mean that you're just checking a box, but 3 different avenues and outlets, all really in the same realm. You're just gaining public input, right? But how you're gaining it is important. I think that would be inclusive. I think we could do it where it's timely. And I think, again, you would be able to show, and then the back end, we haven't talked about, but the back end, the tail end is important too. And I think I don't mean it this way, I think it's a little bit easier on the back end, because I think you should do, some sort of public, meet and greet, advertise it a week or so in advance. Here's my finalists, here are our finalists. Have them come. I mean, I just did one for the city of Oberlin, Ohio, not crazily dissimilar from Montpelier, highly educated population, very involved public, city council, a little bit bigger, but city council format, council manager form of government. Worked out splendidly, I mean, a ton of people came to each forum. We facilitated it. It was about an hour and a half worth of time. We didn't have any downtime at all, and it went really well. And we had post-meeting surveys for each of those ones for the public, QR code and paper. So what were your viewpoints on how things went, kind of a thing?
So can we mix two ways, like can we just circulate survey first, then have the public forums, then the QR code and the, like a post survey or something? Instead of like doing only one, can we mix two options?
No, you could certainly mix.
Okay. I think that will be better because some people cannot attend the meeting,
Sure,
so they
yep.
can just like fill out the survey. And when people can come and share their ideas, then it will be in-person forum for them. Thank you.
I think really, right, we'd be potentially doing all three, right? With paper surveys, online surveys, and then a public forum. All of that information you would then take and synthesize and come up, do like cluster analysis of like these are the major themes that you heard that would inform the ideal position description or candidate profile that we're looking for.
But we're also talking about doing this
Sorry, go ahead.
at the, really pretty fast, because at the front end of things, by what people have been talking about, because I'm thinking about if that's going to go into, if that's going to be an input for figuring out what the job announcement is going to look like and what our rubric for evaluating candidates is going to look like, then we need to be jumping on that pretty quickly. Because I'm also, as we talk about this, I'm also thinking about, well, what does our timeline look like overall? And here we are in the middle of July. We don't want this to go on forever. And I'm just picturing, well, are we going to be looking at final interviews at the same time that we're also putting together next year's budget? Which,
Well, I have some thoughts on timeline, but you have a question?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Okay. So timeline, so it's dependent upon some of the things that we're talking about, but say those get addressed, right? So I'm going to pick a date and then say from that date. So the date we're ready to go live with the position profile, right, the recruitment profile, you probably have about a 3 to 4 week window of application submissions.
after that, yep.
Correct, yep. And so say that's a month. And so you're 30 days from whenever we can agree upon what that looks like to go live with. And then that next 30-day stretch, and it doesn't need to take 30 days, within that next 30-day window, you would be looking to schedule those first round interviews. I mean, that could be as early as a couple of weeks after. Again, depends on kind of what that screening process that you desire, what you want it to look like, how timely you all can be with the feedback of what you want your feedback to look like. So I'd say conservatively, I think in that 30-day window is certainly possible. And then you're looking at, okay, say you interview 5 to 8 people or whatever, then you narrow that down to 2, 3, or 4, whatever that looks like. That can be in that next probably 15 to 20-day window after that second 30-day window. So you're getting close to that kind of 90-day period. And then you're looking at selection after that, right? So it's coalescing around a candidate shortly thereafter, which is another probably couple of weeks after that. So that's generally what it would look like. I mean, I tried to sketch a few things out with some actual dates, just as some what-if situations. Today, the 15th, the intake process has started, the survey. I'll be looking at the job description. We have these questions on process points and public involvement. So the big one would be that public involvement. So the easier part would be, I could probably very quickly start working with the communications office to put together a paper, web-based, as you said, and kind of e-digital survey-based instrument to at least commence that process for the public component. You could be outward about that probably next week, I would imagine, just as a what-if situation. And then maybe look to schedule that public engagement session. I have to look at my personal schedule to be able to align with what you would like. And I mean, it doesn't even need to be an actual council meeting, so you don't need to worry about warrant and public notices. I think it would just be putting something out there that this is going to be taking place, and you'd have to be okay with whatever structure we would agree with in terms of what that's going to look like. And then again, shortly thereafter is like coming up with, I'll be working on this concurrently, basically keep framing some things together. So for example, a recruitment profile is not just ideal characteristics of a city manager. It's also what about the city community? So what about the form of government? What about the organizational chart? What about the budget size? What about the departmental makeup? Current challenges, intergovernmental partners. There was a capital plan discussion here earlier that I saw the tail end of it. There's maybe some comments about capital planning. The city plan was just adopted, I think, a couple weeks ago. References to that. So it'll be a lot of stuff that really we don't need to wait on, really. That's going to be demographic, data that is reflective of what the city's all about. And then what we'd be waiting on would be your inputs, the staff department head inputs, and the public inputs on those ideal characteristics.
One of the things, looking at some of the practical questions you're raising, one of the things that I think seems like kind of a fundamental question is whether we're planning on a full council involvement or some subset being a hiring committee. And my feel is that, this is a big deal, that I think everyone's going to want to be fully involved from the beginning. But we'll see. People can shake their heads if they think I'm totally wrong about it, but I don't think I am. So I think we can proceed with that as an assumption.
All right, that's helpful. What about I think we're good. Are we good on the public? Oh, sorry.
Oh, so I just was working on very quickly some numbers. If we look at the timeline and work backwards, I think and maybe you have this already, but I think this might go through till December, January, until someone is signed on, ready to go. I think that's the realistic timeline, because with just some raw numbers here, we have the community input, then we have the review and analysis, we've got the development of the recruitment profile, which is going to take time. Your time might be fast, but we're not super fast. Just the reality of it. I think we would try to get it, I think it would have to align with our city council meeting so we could approve it in an expedited manner. And then the recruitment period, then you have screening. So you have to screen the candidates. Then we have first round interviews, second round interviews. If we want to do a final public forum, final selection, that's getting into December, just with a pretty aggressive timeline. Just throwing that out there, just with some dates that I threw in.
I think it's really important to be realistic.
Yeah.
And also, I would argue if that's how long it takes, that's how long it takes, right? I don't think we want to truncate a process because obviously we all want to go as quickly as it can, but I think it's a lot more important to get it right.
Yeah, just as you were laying it out, it sounded like 4, 5, 6 months in that range. 6 might be a little longer.
Yeah, if you're talking the tail end is what level of public involvement, do you want, how quickly can you meet up to make a decision, right, as a council? The extension of an offer, a conditional offer, subject to the final background checks, which can take a little time. The notice period that the individual may need to provide the current employer, depending on the situation, is not going to be 2 weeks. If it's an external party, it's going to be longer than that. So you have that to account for as well.
Jim.
I think you.
Wait a minute, Palin.
Related to this question.
Palin, could you hold off a minute? Jim had his hand up and he hasn't had a chance. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's going to be very awkward to have this end, I would say, from the middle of December through January, because we're going to be right in the middle of the budget, and to have somebody come in right in the middle of the budget is going to be very awkward. They're not going to be up to speed. To me, it looks like we might not make this decision till the end of January. And I'm fine with that, because I think to try to make it in the middle of budget is going to be very awkward for us. I've been through a lot of budgets. Budgets take time. They can be sometimes contentious, and sometimes it takes time for just the council to agree among themselves. So to try to bring somebody in December and January, I think is going to be really tough. And so I think that we should not, we either got to make one decision or the other. Finish before December or finish after January. That's but we want to finish before a new council's in. So I would say we would have to say the latest month we can finish in is February. So I'm just asking if that sounds reasonable to a council to have this wrapped up by February before possibly a new council comes in. But we got the budget right in the middle of this. So that could leave us a whole month of maybe middle of January on to February to finish it up and still have the budget done with who we got here now.
Yeah, I think that's, and you probably know the budget we have town meeting day, first Tuesday in March, so that's when the election is, including the voters passing the budget. So we finish the budget roughly a month before that. Palin.
So I work for higher ed, and when we hire a new person, we put the start date on our ad job post. So if we can pick a start date and put it on our ad, then we can just like plan everything backwards. So maybe we should pick a start date. I don't know, which is like January 15 or February 1st. Or December 20, something like very specific start date.
So,
I have no experience with that, but it seems to me it might constrain applications for people who, for one reason or another, don't meet that date. I mean, if they miss it by what, a month? Is that a disqualification?
Yeah, it's just an option because in academia we do this every time like that. So everybody knows when they will start, when they apply for the job.
Yeah.
So that's very common.
Just one thought on timeline based on some of the feedback. What I could do, after this evening is sort of try to sketch out based on at least some of the feedback received today, guidance received to date, what some rough estimating might look like, and kind of a couple different scenarios, and provide that back to you as well.
okay. Carrie, I think I saw your hand go up and down, and I'm not sure where it is, but it's important to hear you. Oh. Okay, well, we'll come back to Carrie whenever you're available. Adrian.
I'll just, if we're going to do a public forum, I just want to make sure that pre and during, I don't know, like the pre-public forum, that's going to be like all hands on deck, right? So I feel like that's going to be a very quick turnaround. We want to get the information as quick as possible, and I want to make sure we have a plan to disseminate the information. Mark's here using NeighborNet, like maybe we can have people like just go out and get into the community as quickly as possible, get the word out. But I really want to have a very strong plan as to what our avenues of communication are going to be. I think we have a lot of tools in our toolbox to get the word out there, but I want to make sure that we're very strategic, that we have a plan, who's doing what. Even if we have like a 1 or 2 week turnaround time for the neighborhood, the community to fill out a form, I think it's going to have to be a very, very strong push from us to get out there and make sure people know what's there, complete it, because I think that's the biggest feedback that I've gotten is that our community wants to provide input, and this is our time. Like this will be it, and we'll have to be very focused and very, thoughtful of how we do that. So if that is the way we go, I want to make sure before we do that, we have a plan on who's doing what those avenues are, and all the tools that we have before we do it.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, even before you were just talking about this idea of like, you know, coming out of this meeting, you know, you could go back, sketch out the timeline, but like, again, what I would just really love to see is maybe it's scenarios or just a single proposal of like, this is, you know, I heard this, like, this is the proposal of the structure for this search, you know, with the timeline. So again, like, just things like, it's full council involvement, it's not a subcommittee, right? Like, I do still have a question about advisory committee, a community advisory committee, that includes staff, right? Like, I think, we talked about a lot of different forms of input, but I also think it's important for there to be dialogue from people who outside of the council that are providing input. So anyway, I would just really love to see like you come back to us with like, based on our conversation, here's the proposed search process that I'm recommending for you folks.
Yep.
We can tweak it, but just having it written down, and then to your point, Adrian, like, oh, I see here that we're going to be doing this public forum on whatever this date is. You know, we can, like, you know, you can work with Evelyn or whatever. We can really come up with that communications plan around those specific items. But I think the more we just document it and have clarity around it, the more efficient it will be.
So, Ian, one of the questions that, you know, you've done this a lot of times, we've never done it, nobody here has ever done it anyway. Thinking in terms of what the end of the process looks like, it sounded as though you were envisioning that at the very end, we would maybe bring in one person to be the, to do some kind of public quorum involvement thing. Are you thinking that it's one, or are you thinking we get multiple candidates at the end of the process?
I would envision it's multiple, and if I misspoke there, yeah, I would not have envisioned, you know, probably just one.
Okay,
More than one.
good, that makes sense.
For those kind of true finalists, we're wanting to make a decision from whatever this group looks like, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4. And then at that point in time, though, yes, making a decision on one of them, and then sort of behind the scenes after that, if you will, is like a, you know, conditional offer with, you know, conditioned on council approval, conditioned on successful background check, and conditioned on successful negotiation of whatever the terms and conditions of employment are. Those are the 3 major ones you want to, you know, condition the offer on. But no, bringing to the fold multiple people that are talented.
Jim?
I would just like to say, when we do make up the survey, we obviously don't want it to be so long that people look at it and just toss it. Because, you know, but maybe you can tell us what is the number of pages that, you know, you find to be the most successful, that range?
Yeah, I guess probably shorter is better for the public one, just because everybody's got a lot of time commitments, a lot of things going on. So I can certainly take a stab at something that's robust, but not super long.
Yeah, because I do think there's a lot of people, well, I might want to do this, but geez, it's 9 pages, and
Yeah.
I got 3 kids running around, and my job's calling me all the time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, keep that in mind. All right?
Yeah, duly noted. So what I'm hearing is a you know, homework on my end. It would be kind of just sketching out a search structure based on what we talked about today, which will include, you know, maybe some rough timeframes, what the communication plan would look like, the public engagement, all the other various sections that we already talked about. And then if I look at my notes again, really just any lingering questions that would remain that I would need, you know, input on. And again, I don't want to give off a false impression that we're just waiting, because some things can get going on and they have commenced already. So you know, we're getting the ball rolling in terms of framing out this.
You've probably met Evelyn face to face
I
already,
actually
right?
have not, no.
Okay, she's right there. She's our,
Oh, all right.
Evelyn's our communications director. It seems like you'll be getting to know her pretty
I will,
well.
yes. Definitely.
Can I ask one?
Yeah,
I think all of us want to have some kind of community group, like advisory board or something, to help us during the search process. Can we just come up other names for that? Because I think introducing the idea is very important. So I just want to highlight that community concept in it. So like, what other options? I'm not expecting you answering right now. Like, yes, we can use advisory board or advisory group. What else we can use, like, which involves community and the community engagement? I think it is important to highlight that angle.
Yes, right now, to be honest, I have that highlighted as a lingering question, because I don't know if I've got consensus from everybody here on what that would look like, and sort of like the structure of it. So certainly talk about that now, or I can include it as a lingering question for further input.
I'm going to call on Carrie now because.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ian, for coming in. I really appreciate you being there in person. Sorry, I can't be there in person. I've already met you on Zoom, but some day I'll meet you in person. I just wanted to kind of follow up on that idea of community engagement and what the structure of it will be. And that, because I think I heard you talking about some pros and cons to having an advisory board or a separate committee from the community. And so I guess I just want to reiterate that I'm not sold on what the exact structure of that will be. And I'm hoping for recommendations from you. And maybe you'll have questions for us that will help kind of clarify what we think we want and what we need. And that might help you decide what that structure will be. And I do think, obviously that needs to happen quickly, but I don't think that can happen right now, tonight.
One more thing, very
Yeah.
short. So I am visioning that group will work with the council, not two separate groups. So I don't know if it will help the structure. So it is important we are, as a bigger group, I know the city council will do the decision, the final decision, but I feel like that community group shouldn't doing everything separately. I think we should be doing things together. But again, like, it's just an idea. I don't know if in the practice it will work or not.
Also, just real quick on that, have you ever seen scenarios in which there are other city managers, other city managers in the state or location who would participate in such an advisory committee, who maybe can't imagine that any of them wouldn't be interested in applying for this job, but like if they weren't, participating.
I have seen that, I wouldn't say it's ultra common, but I have seen it, yeah. I in fact have been one of those participating managers many years ago at an interview screening committee for a position, so they wanted to involve other people who were not interested applicants. I was one of those people. So I've seen it happen, but it's not ultra common.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of where Carrie is, that we're talking about a lot of community involvement by, bringing people together at the very beginning of the process to talk about structuring it and how things, what we're looking for, and bring people together at the end to meet with the candidates, to give every opinion that they have about the candidates, how practical it is and how necessary it is to have a committee of the public working side by side with the council right along. I'm not saying I don't think it'll work. I think I can be convinced, but I'm not there yet. And I know what other people think.
I think it was a good suggestion relative to, maybe I could take a stab at thinking about that a little bit, contemplate it, and get back to it on maybe some structural suggestions on what that would look like, to your point. I can do that.
During this pause, I'm going to see if there are any members of the public, either in the room or on Zoom, who would like to share their thoughts, because this is a decision that's going to affect everybody in the community for hopefully a long time. Hopefully we get someone who wants to be here and we want them to stay, and so they won't be here for 2 years. They'll be here for longer than that. So is there anyone in the room? Steve? Mark?
Steve Whitaker. I think a right up front decision that the council needs to wrestle with is the documented presumption that that Country Club Road is Mike Miller's project. That, you know, that the developers are going to tell us what we do up there. And I think the skill set that we're going to need in a city manager might need to be stewarding that public investment, that $4 million we've got stuck in Country Club Road already, but the potential to have a second resilient village out there, 138-acre walkable village. That's going to take some experience in weaving together the ambition of house building with the other needs that might need to coexist there. And so that's going to that needs to be defined up front. If you think we're just going to put out an RFP and the developers are going to tell us what we do out there, that would be really missing the boat for the skill set that we need in the city manager. So a couple of the other criteria would be, what kind of regional collaborative experience are we looking for? Because the shape of the direction of the scale of our problems many of them are regional, and we don't have a good track record. Look at what we did with the Public Safety Authority. We launched it, it never got fully launched, and then we tanked it in order to preserve Montpelier's dispatch monopoly, which is unregulated, ungoverned, and killed a man. So we really need to seek out the skills that are going to know how to work with the surrounding towns and build kind of a regional collaborative governance, even though we're still having our own identity. Experience in dealing with massive infrastructure deficits. I watched the earlier CIP program. We're just scratching the surface. Steady state is not what we need. We've got decades of mismanagement and decades of deficit that need to be addressed in a more accelerated manner. Rebuilding trust and engagement. We've got so many people who don't trust council. It's not worth their time to speak up, and they'll watch, they'll grumble, they'll say it's not worth coming and talking. And I encourage them to talk, but I can't convince them because the confidence isn't there that you're listening, and for obvious reasons. The courage to cull staff. We've got some deadwood that we need to, deal with, no matter what the mayor says, and we're not going to be able to afford. So local.
Thanks, Steve.
Affordability. Oh, the role of nonprofits.
Okay.
How we've outsourced government to.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. We'll hear from you.
Well, we're looking for public involvement. Mark.
Thank you. Mark Wynn, I live at Ridge Street. First, you said this is probably the most important thing the council will do. I take probably out of that, this absolutely is the most important decision that this council will make, in my opinion. Just to speak about the process itself, I do think that the question of how do we find people for an advisory council, if we're sending out a survey, I think that people can self-identify as being interested in that, and we would then from there have a pool of potential candidates for folks to evaluate. I think that that advisory council needs to include, obviously, residents of the town. I think past city councilors, past staff are an important ingredient in that, because we're in a unique situation where the previous manager was with us for 30 years. For most of us, but many people have lived through that, and many people have important insight to bring to what we see differently or the same in the next manager. I do think that it's important that in terms of the timeline, I'm not sure that it's essential to hold community-wide forum before posting the job description. I think the job description is probably, you probably already have a pretty good idea about that, what that is. But then, how are we going to evaluate people based on that, and what are the community priorities, are the types of things that we might look forward to that. In addition to that, whittling down from the people that participate in that, who might be good candidates to sit on advisory committee. Jack, to your point, I do think that it is important that the advisory committee work right alongside council, also not in two separate pools, but sort of as one group, knowing that 7 of you, or 7 of the council, are making the decisions and everyone else is there with their primary function to bring in voices from the rest of the community that maybe you 7 would not have thought of on your own, and to keep those voices and those issues alive in the conversation. I very much appreciate the Sal's comment about finding the people that aren't the loudmouths in town, like myself, who always raise their hand and always have something to say. I think that there are important voices out there that are often very quiet, that are important to find. And to that, you've mentioned several items about inclusion. I think that, thank you for that. I think that's super, super important. Some of the questions I would have, you mentioned that you already have identified potential folks from within your network. How do we make sure that this is a nationwide search that is reaching well beyond your network, all of our networks here, outside of our state, to try to attract all the best candidates we possibly can? What in the process is there that counters our natural internal biases? And sorry, anyway, that's it. Thank you for your time.
You'll be back, I know. Thanks, Mark. Is there anyone on Zoom who's got some input at this point? Okay. Ian, where do you think we are right now? You feel like you have a good handle on things?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
this has been really helpful. I got some great inputs. I'll kind of quickly turn around some thoughts, honestly, in the next couple of days, in terms of structure and some suggestions, any lingering questions that I kind of see, thoughts on this advisory board structure, thoughts on the public forum component, public engagement, staff involvement as well, timeline. So, I mean, I got enough to run with right now, for sure.
Can I ask, who's the point of contact, right? Like, Tom's been doing a great job of doing that, but like from, again, if this is a council decision, council needs to own it. Who's the point of contact on council that's communicating with Dina?
I assume Tanya and me.
Good.
Any other questions for me?
Really glad you're here.
Yeah.
Everybody happy?
Thanks for having me. Okay.
Okay.
You know how to get a hold of me. So
Are you-
I'll be in touch.
Driving back tonight?
No, I'll stay over.
Oh, good.
Thank you for contributing to our
Yes,
local action.
yes. I got to contribute to the text.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Happy to do that as well. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, that was a lot. We're up to item 9, discussion of possible implementation strategies for Country Club Road. Mike, come on up.
Evening, thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Council. Mike Miller, Planning Director for the city. So we're not making any decisions tonight, so this is really an update and a preview. I gave you a little bit of a preview last week, and we're in a period of learning, and so there was a little bit of a question, should just push this, but it seems to make sense to have the conversation with you in case you have questions, because what I'm doing right now is a lot of data gathering with the state to be able to answer the questions that you guys can make a decision on how we want to, if we want to, adjust our process on Country Club Road. So apologies, it'll be a lot, but I'm going to break it into 3 pieces, keep it pretty succinct, so that way we'll take some questions and we'll see where we end up. As you know, Country Club Road has had a work plan which roughly translates into adopt the plan, apply and receive the growth center, which has a deadline this fall. 3, use that approval to qualify for TIF and apply for that TIF to pay for the infrastructure. And then sometime next year, do an RFP with developers to get developers on board once we have a full slate of tools for them to work with. So that's what we've been working on as our work plan, but 2 significant items have changed potentially in our favor that we now need to kind of decide whether or not we need to adjust how our work plan is going. And so the qualifier is, as I mentioned, I don't have all the facts, so I'm getting answers now, and I'm hoping within the next week, so I'll be back on the agenda next week with hopefully some answers. But if you have questions, let me know. I'll put them down, I'll get to the state, and we'll try to get all the answers, unless I already have them. So the first thing I'll talk about is the first change that's happened is the Tier 1A status. That's part of Act 181, that's part of the Act 250 bill. The short version that everybody remembers is Act 250 is going to create, regional planning commissions are going to create these maps, future land use maps. Certain areas are going to be designated Tier 1A, and cities can opt into them, and it's basically designating an area where Act 250 isn't going to apply, and it has some other benefits. One of the benefits that I didn't know about until yesterday when I was talking with Jacob Hemrick from the state is that it's also a checkbox to qualify for TIF. So the reason we were all setting up to try to do this complicated growth center application to expand our growth center to include Country Club Road was because we need TIF to pay for the infrastructure, and for us to qualify for TIF, we need the growth center. So we needed to go through that process. Well, now we don't necessarily have to. We could do a growth center, or we can do a Tier 1A, which we are expecting is something that we would qualify for, and it's something that we could do as an alternative. We would just have to make sure that Country Club Road is within that Tier 1A eligible area on the regional plan map. So if this is true, that we can do that, and I'm trying to confirm it. He mentioned that it's true, and I said, send it to me in writing. I want something that I can definitively point to and say that's absolutely the case. And if it's true, the drawback is, so the minus is timing. So growth center would be effective right away. So if we did a growth center and we got approved, it would be September to November of this year. If we decided, let's not do that, let's do Tier 1A, I've received 2 different effective dates. And again, this is the information I'm trying to find out. One effective date is, it could be effective as quickly as December 2025. And that's what the state thought. The state said, the RPC should be ready to go, this will be in effect. You could be Tier 1A as soon as December. If that's the case, there's absolutely no reason for us to do a growth center application. That would be a lot of extra work with very little benefit. The Regional Planning Commission thinks it might not be effective till June. Pushes it out another 6 months. So what is that, does that 6-month window hurt us? It's a question mark. So my answer to you at this point is, let me get the answer, but we'll have a conversation about whether that makes a difference, and if it does or doesn't, you know, we can make a decision at that point. But it is important for us to qualify for TIF as an option. And we'll get to one of the other changes, which may mean we don't have to do TIF, but let's start with this. If we want to do this, it might make sense for us to go for Tier 1A instead. So let me pause there just for a second to see if everyone is kind of understanding some of that before I move on to the next change in state law. That helps.
Two questions. Under the land use review maps, to get that tier 1A status, what would Country Club Road need to be designated? What type of land use would it be on the map?
It would be a planned growth area.
A planned growth area?
Yes.
So a planned growth area will qualify for a tier 1A?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And if it were already in the growth center, it would automatically qualify for that designation. It's not, so we would just have to make sure it's in the future land use map.
Thank you. The other question I have is, we're talking about a growth center application expansion for Country Club Road, but also for other areas too, right? And were those two what was the relationship between those? And if we decided, you know, we're not going to go for the growth center because there's this much easier path for Country Club Road that would get us the same outcome, what happens to those other areas that we were considering for growth center?
So I was going to talk about that.
We're talking about the R9000.
Oh, the Res 9000, yes. So I was going to try not to add too many extra layers to this. That is true. The Tier 1A, as it's laid out right now and proposed, includes the same Res 9 area that we were talking about. So if the Tier 1A is effective in December, we would get both Country Club Road and the Res 9000 all in, rather than doing two growth center applications or one big growth center application. My recommendation was to do two separate growth center applications because I feel they're two separate sets of statistics and facts. But
So you feel that, like, the thinking is that the Res 9000 would also be tier 1?
yes, that is what, if you go onto our city plan and look at the future land use map,
Yeah.
you'll see the areas that have been laid out as planned growth areas. So it's in the city plan already laid out. So that's the first set of things that have kind of changed, and I'll bring it all back together when we get to the end, and hopefully, like I said, anytime in the interim, if there are questions between now and next week, you can let me know too. The second big change that you've probably heard in the newspapers is this discussion about a new program called CHIP, Community Housing Infrastructure Program, I think. And really, CHIP and TIF, tax increment financing, which we have had and have done, they're the exact same program with one difference. I mean, the applications are completely different. CHIP is a lot easier. But they're really the same thing. They're using future taxes to pay for infrastructure. They're both using the same idea. You need a road for your project. You're going to be building a project. We're going to do a bond to build the road, and then we're going to take the taxes generated from that new development to pay that bond. They both work the same way. The difference, the CHIP is way easier to apply for. TIF, we've talked about, just applying for TIF is $100,000 just to hire Whitenburg to do our application. It's a very complex application. We've done it before. We've had it. So it's not impossible, but they are much more complicated to get and administer. The catch is between TIF and CHIP that tax increment finance is a district, while CHIP is looking at an individual project. So why does that matter for us? We want housing at Country Club Road, and we want housing at Sabins Pasture. So with a TIF, we can make a district that covers both of those properties, and we can share the resources to make sure the infrastructure goes across. If one side or the other is developing at a slightly faster rate, we might be able to, and we want that secondary connection of that road. We need a secondary access for both projects. And so making sure that road connects through is important for both sides. But in a TIF, we can do that. We can share the resources and make sure the road goes all the way through, because we can bring resources from one side to the other to build that out. On a CHIP, the Sabins Pasture folks would be applying for their side, and we would be applying for our side. So we may get our side done faster or slower, and they may get their side faster and slower, but it may be a long time before the roads actually connect at the property lines. Because, yes,
So that wouldn't be considered two chip applications by the city of Montpelier?
there,
If Sabins had, if the developer had one and
we believe, this is one of the other questions that I have out to the state, is we know there's going to be likely two developers. The developer for our site is probably not going to be the developer for their site. It's going to probably be two separate developers. Can we have two developers under a single chip? That's a question for them that they're like, I hadn't even considered that. We're going to have to check with the folks and see what we can come up with. So it's another piece I'm going to try to get some answers to, but that's a second little bit of a wrinkle. But that's where the question comes up. If we do chip, a lot easier. Again, we're back to these things. Gosh, it'd be a lot easier just to do the chip. It's a faster, easier process. Not as complicated as TIF, but I want to make sure we're going to end up with the best outcome on our Country Club Road project in the end. And that's what I want to make sure we don't short circuit ourselves and leave ourselves in a bad spot 3 years down the road saying, we can't add any more housing because we don't have a secondary access. Even though we've got the infrastructure ready to go, we can't do that till we build a road through. Now we need to decide how. I would rather have all the answers, make sure we can do it, or at least provide you all the information you need to make the educated decision that says, let's go with the easier way, or let's stick with the harder way because that's going to give us a better result.
And so it seems like I've heard people talk about CHIP as kind of like project-based TIF. Is that, and so someone else, like it's been in the news that maybe the Isabel Circle project is another thing that could qualify for their own CHIP application. And
yeah, perfect example, perfect project. We tried, basically, we worked on, you all know, we came and worked to try to develop a development agreement policy. Development agreement policy and CHIP are pretty much the same, very similar things. It's a project-based TIF. They just will have the advantage now, if Isabel Circle goes for CHIP, is they also have access to the education funds, which we couldn't provide them. So that helps them with their bottom line a little better than our bottom line will.
Mike, can you talk too about the difference between a TIF district and the CHIP is, right, the developer can apply for the tax increment. And I guess I'm curious about like the risk profile for the municipality for both of those, right? So like if we did a TIF district and the increment didn't cover the debt service, that's on us. As opposed to, the Isabel Circle example, if the developers choose to pursue a CHIP, right? Like there's no bonding, right? Because it's
good question. I tried to get Jacob or somebody from the state to come. It was a little bit of short notice and they said they wouldn't be able to make it. They're going to try to make it coming up at some point, or to provide us with a much more detailed list of, here's a better fact sheet than we have produced so far. So that way there's better facts that we can make decisions based on.
I would love to see someone from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development come to a meeting and be like, actually have a dialogue with them about these kinds of issues. Same with the Regional Planning Commission, just so that we're really like working as a team sport and all on the same page about weighing what are the pluses and minuses of the approach and that there's consensus as we move forward. So I think the degree to which they're willing to come would be fantastic.
Yeah, I am trying, and I did ask, and they said they would try to see if they can't make it for next time, I'll try to get them in August, because it really comes down to having the right answers for you guys, and I don't have all the answers to those questions. So the third piece, the last piece, this kind of brings a couple of the pieces together. The final consideration for that CHIP discussion, you can do the project-based TIF, or you can do the tax increment finance. It goes back to Ben's point, well, isn't it the developer that puts the application in? And the answer is, well, yes, either in conjunction with the city or on their own. So we've talked about having a TIF process where we do the growth center, we do the TIF. Once we're all set, we're going to put the RFP out to get a developer. If council says, I like this CHIP idea, better. I think that's a better approach. We're going to need to switch that around because we will need to put the RFP out for the developer first because we can't put a CHIP application in without the project. So it's not like we can have a decision that said, can we keep both processes going? It's like, not really. We kind of have to decide if we're going this way or this way. But we do have some ways of keeping some avenues open. We can keep both TIF and CHIP open. If we decided, let's not do a growth center, we could start to put an RFP out this fall to get a developer on board. Then, once we get Tier 1A, that gives us both Act 250 exemption and eligibility for TIF. Then we can make the decision, what's our best way of moving forward? We could still do the TIF because we're eligible for that, or we could do the CHIP because we're eligible for that. But it would require us making a change of our process, and that's your call, not my call. So, and we don't have to make that decision tonight. I'm really just putting that on the table as we need to think about this. If you have questions tonight, within the next week, that says something came to me last night, shoot it off to me because I probably don't have your answers. And I'm going to be going to the state over the next week to get more and more answers to more and more of the questions. So the more questions I have, the more prepared I can be to talk to Alex and Jacob and whoever else we can get a hold of. So,
Mike, one of the things that maybe this is what they were thinking about when they decided to legislature decided to do CHIP, because I'm thinking way back to 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, when we were doing the TIF district for the hotel and the parking garage downtown. What the people from White and Burke told us was, don't do a TIF just because you just hope something's going to happen. You do a TIF if you've already got your plan to do something. And so this seems like having CHIP have the developer be the applicant is a different way to embody that principle, that you're not going to make that investment, you're not going to do that until you know that you will be called on, but not yet. We'll do that as part of making sure there's something real that is going to be paid for by this.
yeah, and I think it also helped some of the issues we had with for people who remember our TIF district, it was like an octopus that stretched because we wanted to make sure we included Sabin's Pasture to make sure that they would have access to the TIF. We wanted to make sure it extended all the way to the hotel and parking garage project. And then it wasn't allowed to touch certain other areas because of the rules of the VEPSI board. And so it ended up with this weird configured. But what would have been best for everybody would have been able to say, we'll have a TIF district for the hotel project, a TIF district for Sabin's Pasture. And it would have been much easier and cleaner, and we wouldn't have had to have as many problems. But that wasn't, you're not allowed to have 2 TIF districts, you're only allowed to have 1. And we worked with the rules we had.
So,
the number of TIFs, state TIFs, I mean, there was a state TIF and a municipal TIF, right? Is that a differentiation that they make with CHIP? And whether they do or don't, is there a limit on the number of CHIP applications or projects that can take place, just as there was a limit on the number of TIF districts?
So my understanding, I know that there used to be a limit on the number of TIF districts, and there was a limit on how many could be in any single county, and so there are a few things. There are still eligible ones out there, so we're not worrying about missing out on any of the TIF ones. The CHIP, I believe they set a top thing. They basically have said the board has 2 billion. Yeah, that was the number that was in my head. They can do up to $2 billion worth of deferred increment. And so that's, I don't know how much that would take, but it sounds like an awful big number.
Adrian.
Thank you for all this. My head is going to explode a little bit. This is outside of my area of expertise. So I'm going to focus on what I know best. One of the, when we think about Country Club Road, and I know there's been, 3-4 years of planning, and there's a lot of, positives and negatives in our community around Country Club Road, Sabins Pasture. What are we doing with this? Sell it, keep it? I think we're keeping it because we're going to develop it. We're going to build houses up there. One of the things that, during our subcommittee meetings that we had for like 6 hours, trying to revamp that map and making it be more broad, I think that was good. But what makes me nervous is when we talk about, an RFP for a developer, because I don't think the council is on the same page as to what our vision is for the property. I think we have all very different ideas of what should be up there. And so that makes me a little nervous because we don't have a plan, right? We have very big blobs of like areas of development that, we can develop on. And so I've talked to Sandy, she's here tonight, and I just wanted to share with the council that her and her group of professionals have agreed to do like a visionary contest for that area. It will not at all interrupt our timeline. It has nothing to do with what we're doing, but I think it's important that I will support that because I'm a visionary. I want to see what our community has ideas for that property. And it's not just tiny homes. It could be a community of clusters. It could be the recreation facility. I'll just say what I don't want personally is apartment buildings that are 4 stories that are right there in the middle of our property. Maybe that is the winning, design that developers come in and say, this is what we want. But I think this is an opportunity to engage our community, to engage our youth. I would love, I talked to Sandy about this. Let's reach out to Montpelier High School, Spalding, U32. Let's get our youth involved and really see what they envision. This is their future. This is their property. This is where they might want to live. Let's work with the senior center. We know that there's folks that want to downsize. What do they want to live in? And really take the time to get the community input now, 3 years later, because I think it will reinvigorate the energy around this property. It will build excitement again. It'll have like a positive spin around what the possibilities are. What is the vision? What could we do? As you all know, I've consulted with Blue Zones, which is, healthy communities around the country. And I've seen firsthand what very good planning can be when it's walkable, it's bikeable, you have access to fresh fruit, you have medical facilities, you have childcare located within a walkable community. Is that what we want here in Montpelier as our next community that is the last flood-resistant land in our town? I think simultaneously with Mike's process, working through all these complicated applications, I think it's a really good time to revision what we want this community to look like. And it's not going to take city resources. Sandy and her group of professionals are willing to host this, facilitate it, have town meetings, do surveys, collect all the data and present it back to city council within the same timeline that Mike's proposing for either of these processes. I think would work very well. But I just don't want to leave it up to the developers to make the decision for us. I really want to take the time to have community input and understand all the possibilities that we can build up there and all different ways of imagining the future for Montpelier and what we're building for the next generation of where we live. So I just wanted to throw that out there as just something that I've been talking about and working. I haven't done anything with it, but I've been talking with Sandy and just thinking about what that could look like. And I wanted to share it with you all as, something that's going to happen and just that, what that may look like. That's
Thanks, Adrian. Mike, have you pretty much got to the end of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that was it, unless we were going to go through some of what Ben sent me a few questions. If you want me to go through those, you're good? Okay. That was the only other thing I had was to answer Ben's question. So if you're good, I can step aside.
Well, no, I wasn't asking you to step aside. Okay. I was thinking that this might now be the point to open it up to the public. I see Sandy's got her hand up, and there may be some people online who also want to be heard. So Sandy, I'll call on you. And Sandy, I will remind you of the time limit.
Hi, I'm Sandra Vitztum on Loomis Street. I actually did not intend to speak tonight. I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about the chip TIFs, because there was a little misinformation, I believe. So their official name is chip TIF, because they're a kind of TIF, and there is a limit on them, which could put the city in competition with itself. That is not sure yet. That's a really important question to get settled. So the way they work is there can be a developer and there can be a sponsor, but the primary entity that is getting involved with the legal obligation, the debt, is a municipality. I have not heard in all of the discussions at the State House of the developer taking over a municipal obligation. A developer is not necessary at this point. They're working on their rules. They're going to finish the rules in November. And the municipality can function as a developer. The key thing is that they are very specific documents. You have to outline the exact parcels and say what their value is and what the improved value is in order to calculate the increment. So they are not, the one that I'm working on with Plainfield right now, it's not a loosey-goosey estimate of what one hopes to do. It's a guarantee, because you're guaranteeing, the municipality is guaranteeing to the state that it will contribute so much money per year, 85% of the incremental tax value. So that was all I needed to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve.
I'm sure I'll run out of time. What really caught me was that no benefits of the growth center. The benefits of the growth center are the strict planning requirements. We absolutely need a master plan if we're going to get what the community wants and needs up there. It cannot be left loosey-goosey. Tier 1A is not a slam dunk either. Our capacity to regulate these things and plan these things is not self-evident, and it's subject to review by the Land Use Review Board. So just because we have a zoning administrator and a planner doesn't mean that we're guaranteed Tier 1A exemption from Act 250. But I'm really troubled, and you should be too, that we have been barreling along trying to design or develop Country Club Road without caring about the traffic or the prime ag soils. Those are two fundamental pieces and protections of what has preserved Vermont for what it is today. And we can't ignore those. We can't just, I think that you're going to see the regional commission sober us a bit about the traffic and our surrounding towns. None of our surrounding towns got proper notice under our current city plan that you've just adopted is not going to hold up legally, because the planning commissioners of the abutting towns were not served a copy of, even in February, and a link to a website that wasn't even working back then doesn't constitute it, and nor did a return receipt come in, which is the requirement of law. So the number of corners that have been cut that have left us in this mess should really give all of y'all pause. The question is, how do we get out of it? And we need to, the CDBG, that August deadline you've been hearing about, the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, does have I think 3 million of it is set aside for planning. And if we emphasize the resilience potential of Country Club Road, we could get, potentially, we could get state funding for a master plan that includes Country Club Road and even extends into Sabins. But we should absolutely, I think we're gonna end up being able to develop Sabins or cooperate with the developer in Sabins and Chip faster than we're gonna get to do Country Club Road. And so we should probably apply as the city for for CDBG-DR money on behalf of both of those parcels. Whether or not they ever connect is another story, but this needs more time than 2 minutes.
Thanks, Steve. I do not see anybody else online with their hands up, but I want to give people a chance. Obviously, we'll be coming back to hear from you about this multiple occasions after this. But I think we're good for now. And now, I think it's time for our break. 8:25, back in 10 minutes. We can go back into session. We don't have much left to do. We have executive session for a couple of items. So what I'll do is go through the reports, and Carrie had to leave the meeting. So once we're to the point of executive session, we can log off and give you a chance to break down your stuff. Meanwhile, we'll go into the room next door so that we're not interfering with each other. So, council reports. Starting on your end, Ben?
I just want to say I really appreciate being here and looking forward to this sort of process. Feels good to have that kind of direction, and just really pleased to see that the application for 5 Home Farmway floodplain restoration project scored very highly and has been submitted on to FEMA, which I think is really great news. And then finally, just touring tomorrow, taking another look at touring the federal building with GSA. I'm happy to report back what we see next.
See if you can carry down any furniture with you.
I'll get to go visit my old office, actually.
All right. Palin.
No report, thank you.
Sal. Jim.
A couple things, both dealing with the committee I'm on for the business. We had a Washington County mental health person in, also Rick DeAngelis, who has agreed to join the committee. I'm going to I was at the homeless task force meeting today, which was quite a long one, and heard how they feel about things. I've also invited one of them to join that committee. So, I said, you don't have to be a business owner to be a part of that committee. We'd like one of the homeless task force members to come on. I think Zach maybe is going to come over. They were trying to put together a motion to tell us, answer them on something, but they couldn't even agree on their motion, so I don't think it ever got made or seconded or put forth. But their feeling is, first of all, why do we want to hook up with a housing committee that doesn't even exist? Which it really doesn't right now, because it is not meeting. It hasn't met in months. We don't really want to be a part of them. We've heard that some of them don't want to be a part of us. They want to be recognized as their own committee. I said, well, we're trying to thin down the committee, so that doesn't really thin it down. If you're all of a sudden from a task force to a committee, I said, my recommendation to them personally was, I think they ought to join a regional, because this is a regional thing. And I don't think being, on their own, they're going to get much done. But I said, here's the thing, if you join the housing committee, you're going to have more people, you're going to hear more opinions, you might get some diversity on stuff rather than you all that think a lot alike, although they don't all think a lot alike, because there isn't always a lot of an agreement among them. And so I think they're gonna really look for some kind of direction from us to tell them, and then if we tell them something they don't like, they're probably gonna disband. And, so I don't know, I really didn't get a sense of where all of them stood, but it seems like most of them don't want to be part of housing. I said, the housing group would make sure you had an allotment of time in the meeting to just be on your thing, you know? I mean, okay, let's say we meet for an hour and a half. Half an hour can be just their stuff. Half an hour of the housing stuff, a half an hour for general stuff, or something like that. So they're still trying to figure things out. I think they're going to have another meeting maybe soon, and I'll go to it like I did today and try to figure out. But they never got the motion to us, but they kind of want direction from us, and they want it soon. And so that because I think in a way they kind of feel like they're wasting their time, and they don't really want to waste their time anymore, some of it. So it's up to us to say, we don't want you to be a committee, or we'll allow that. We'd like you to do this. We need to tell them what we would like as a recommendation. I said there's two really, join the housing or go out and join a region. But I said, I don't think we're going to accept you as a committee on your own. We're trying to thin these things down. Of course, you heard what he said tonight. Well, you created a child care one. You already added one to your thing. What's one more? So, I mean, we have to come to an agreement among us to let them know what's going on.
Thanks, Jim. Adrian?
And about that child care task force. So the child care committee is time bound, and we have goals and we have action steps that we want to take. So if we can replicate that with all committees and have a structure in place with what is the purpose, do your baseline, gather your data, find out where you want to go, and make a plan and get it done, yay, great. So my report is on the Child Care Task Force Committee. So we met last week, and we are partnering with, make sure I get the name right, First Children's Finance. Yep, First Children's Finance.
You're saying two different things.
I know, I'm looking at the email. I had to pull it up to make sure I got it right. So First Children's Finance came, and they are a national organization that works with communities around the country, and they are supporting us pro bono, and they have an office here in Vermont, a staff, so we're their pilot program for Vermont. And what they do is they've provided us with a child care needs analysis. So where are we now for Washington County? We have a report on, so much data on this report of where we are in terms of the folks that live in Montpelier, the people that come to work in Montpelier, where are they coming from? What is the radius of their travel? We have the capacity of the current childcare from 0 to 5, both family centers and, daycare centers, individual daycare centers. And then what are the slots that are needed for Washington County. So what is that gap analysis of what we need and what we're working towards? So we have a huge amount of data that we received. It was very robust, very impressive. And so now the child care committees, we're going to be meeting every 2 weeks to really decide, well, what do we do with this data? What is the plan of action? And what do we want to achieve over the next 6 months to report back to council? And then how do we continue to build that momentum to eventually get more child care spots in Washington County, which is what we need to do to support our families here in Montpelier and within the greater region of Washington County. So it is moving along very well. I'm very happy with the progress. We are going to be recruiting some more members. That'll probably be our next action step, just so we continue to build off the momentum of what we've started. So that's my report.
Right, thanks. The only thing I'll say for a mayor's report, I don't want to extend this, but years ago, one of the things that we asked members of the council to do was to do exactly what Adrian just did, which was to come back and make reports, not necessarily on any formal schedule, on the activities of the committees that they were serving on. And Donna Bate, when she was on the council, was really good at doing that and bringing that back to us. So I just do want to encourage all council members to do that. City clerk's report?
I don't have a report. Thank you.
Okay. City manager's report?
No report tonight, thanks.
Okay. I anticipate going into executive session and not taking any action after we come out. And so at this point, we would, the chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A2 and 3 for the purposes stated in the agenda.
So moved.
And do you have that motion, Sarah? Okay. You have it?
To go, yes, I do.
Okay.
From
Okay.
the packet, I got the
Great.
essays.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. Any-
Can I ask about the second item on there, just the space at Country Club Road, that's not, is there a lease negotiation going on?
Yes, there is.
It hasn't been presented to council.
Right, there's not a lease that's ready to go to council yet. This is, and so, yeah. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,